Hey guys, welcome back to another Ethix educational video, and today we're going to be talking about sitting versus standing when you're flying FPV and differences between the two, why you might do one versus the other. This was actually brought to me by a fan of Ethix and myself, Mr. Steele, and he said, yo, I started standing and I've noticed it's helped a lot with video reception, and not only that, but radio reception as well. Have you noticed this? And you should do a video about why you stand versus sitting and why you think one is different or better than the other. So first of all, I just kind of want to go over what we're talking about. So sitting versus standing, literally it is what it says. Standing flying FPV, where you're standing with the radio, versus sitting when you're flying FPV. So, and let's just kind of go over the generic intro to like flying FPV and why someone would obviously think about sitting versus standing. So when you're flying FPV, it is actually fairly difficult to differentiate yourself and disassociate yourself from the actual aircraft when you're flying. So while you're standing and you're flying FPV, it's not like a out of the box task to be able to fly FPV and have your eyes seeing something and then your body balancing itself while not doing what the aircraft is doing. So that is kind of why standing isn't necessarily the go-to thing for most people, and sitting seems to be like the out of the box, I just got into FPV, or I've always done this, why would I change? And I'll try to talk to you about that, like why you would possibly learn to stand, because that's what I did out of necessity, not because I thought it looked cool or something. So, first of all, let's go into sitting and kind of the generic idea of sitting while flying FPV, and I'll just get you acquainted with the differences of standing versus sitting, talk to you about, hey, video receivers and video transmitters want to be higher off the ground to optimally work correctly, and also in the typical sitting position, you're not actually putting your antennas in an optimal polarization to the aircraft. So first of all, let me go ahead and sit down here, and I will show you kind of the generic sit down position of most FPV pilots, and we'll talk about why this is not actually the best for flying FPV for, let's say, optimal range and optimal performance of said receiver and said transmitter. So sitting down while flying FPV. Most of the time you're actually lower than this. This is actually, I would say my butt is about 2 feet off the ground and my head is about 4.5. So, this is fairly high, but you were talking about 4.5 feet for my actual receiving antennas for video. And we're talking about, less than 2.5 feet for my transmitting antenna if I'm running it between my legs or if I'm holding it like this, which not very many people do. So when I put the goggles on, this is just in a generic seated position for most people that fly FPV. So, this isn't everybody, but generically this is how people sit when they fly FPV. They put the goggles on, they kind of go into this, relaxed shoulder, head down at about a 45-degree angle position, and then they have the radio between their legs and they're flying as such. So just look at this position, and this is actually a fairly high seat compared to most seats. Most people are in camping chairs or a little bit lower to the ground. Yes, this is a fairly comfortable position, but just look at the overall position of my antennas as far as transmitting antennas is concerned and as far as receiving antennas are concerned. So let me just give you like a brief synopsis of what antennas need to do to optimally perform. So when you're talking about a transmitting antenna, you're talking about a linearly polarized antenna. There is a dead spot at the tip and a dead spot at the base, and there is actually a donut style, a donut figuratively, if you're looking physically, a donut looking radiation plot that is coming out of this linearly polarized antenna. So you got to think about it like, hey, this is where all the amazing stuff is happening. This is actually a dead spot, so if you fly and point the antenna at the actual drone, then you're not going to get optimal range. You're probably going to get an eighth of what you could get if you got it like this, and that's just a generic guess, but dead spot versus actual radiation plot happening very well, doing things nicely. So sitting down is putting this out of polarization depending on how it is. Lower frequencies are more susceptible to unpolarization fail-safes and being out of polarization causing more issues than say a 2.4 video or a 2.4 transmitter or even a 5.8 or 5 gigahertz transmitter, depending if you're flying DJI or something. But 2.4 is less susceptible, but when you're talking about 900 megahertz, something like Crossfire here, it is more likely that you're going to have a problem if your antenna, as far as the transmitting side, is not in optimum polarization with the aircraft itself. So when you're talking about setting up antennas to be in the proper polarization as far as aircraft and transmitting antenna is concerned, you want to make sure that they are either horizontal or they are vertical. In my particular experience, I've always found that vertical works best for me. So I try to get my transmitting antennas and my mounted on my quad antennas as vertical as possible so that I can get the most optimum performance out of my equipment. So again, let's just generically say that this had a straight antenna out of it and it doesn't have this 45-degree angle. Even though I have a 45-degree angle on here, I'm still not in optimal polarization because I'm sitting super low and the antenna is usually, or the radio is usually down at about 5 to 10 degree angle. So the radio is like this, the antenna is like super low to the ground, the dead spot's pointed at the ground, and you're really not getting any optimal performance out of your transmitter because it is so low to the ground. That's another thing that we haven't talked about but probably should, and that is the lower the transmitter is to the ground, the poorer performance it's going to have because you're actually absorbing all of that radiation into the earth and it's not actually getting out there. So the earth is acting like a big sponge and sucking up all of your radiation or all of your your transmitting outputs going to the aircraft. So you're losing a lot of range and a lot of quality of signal by being closer to the ground. So again, closer to the ground, out of polarization. Now let's go ahead and look at our head and what our video receiving antennas are doing. So if you put the goggles on and you look at it, again, we're looking at kind of a space like this. Now, I know most people aren't static when they're flying. A lot of people are pulling the Stevie Wonder and flopping around, and you kind of are in this Stephen Hawking style position in your little chair, and you have a Stevie Wonder, or, you know, you could be static. You could just be sitting here like this, but just look at it from a perspective of antenna polarization and also height off the ground. So my patch antenna is pointed directly at the ground, which is not doing me any good because patch antennas are meant to be pointed as far as they are a higher gain and they want to be pointed in a direction that you're trying to receive in a signal from to get optimum performance. Now we're talking about my omnidirectional antenna here, which is actually kind of cocked at about a 45-degree angle. The dead spot is pointed out off of my head, and I have a dead spot towards my body. So if I'm flying out in front of myself, I'm actually flying into the dead spot of my omnidirectional antenna, and again, my patch is literally doing nothing because it's pointed at the ground. Assuming if you're flying over concrete, it could be bouncing off the ground. You could be receiving signals that way, so you might not notice that you're actually getting poor performance if you're flying around concrete a lot. But if you're flying in typical, grassy fields, you're actually not going to get optimum performance because you're looking directly at the ground with your patch antenna. Now, there are some people that fly like this, where they fly upright, okay? So this is actually putting your polarization as far as your receiving antennas for video in an optimum polarization. Now, again, you're not quite as high as you could be with standing, but you're a little better. Now the people that are moving around, you're kind of always in a weird position because your antennas are always moving. So it's kind of like, putting your antennas onto a rabbit and letting it loose into a field and expecting the antennas to be in proper polarization. It's just not going to happen. So the people that move their heads a lot, either try not to move your head as much, or if you can't, then I'm sorry, whatever you're getting right now as far as performance is probably going to be what you're always going to get unless you're switching to a ground station as far as a receiving module in your goggles and you're moving your head. Your antenna or your video reception is always going to vary based on how your head moves. Now, with that being said, your head moving doesn't affect your radio. So your radio is always going to have poor performance because it is lower to the ground. And your antennas are typically out of polarization depending on how you have them set up. If you're mounted vertically, then yes, they're always going to be, unless you're running a 2.4 antenna that can mount like this. And if you're mounted horizontally, then you're super low to the ground. And I just personally haven't had as much luck mounting antennas horizontally as far as receiving on the quad or transmitting on the actual transmitter itself. So now, obviously standing and sitting are slightly different, but they are a lot different when it comes to actually doing it. So sitting down, a lot of newer guys and a lot of people that have been doing this a long time that typically move their head, they have to sit because they're just disoriented and they will fall over if they're standing up. And I know a lot of people that are watching this video are either guilty of it or know someone specifically that moves a lot when they're standing or when they're sitting down, or they might even move when they're standing. And that's you know, it can be scary depending on where you're standing. If you're standing in an open field, it's not that bad. You could just fall over and, you know, hurt yourself slightly by falling and maybe bracing yourself with your wrist. But if you're in a weird location, like standing on top of a rock or something, or in some weird environment where you're near rocks and water, then you could fall in. So there are obviously risks to standing versus sitting as far as people that move around a lot. And that's kind of why it's a learned skill. So I'll talk about why it's a learned skill and why I decided. I used to sit. I used to sit. I started standing. It's a learned skill. It's not something that you just, you know, wake up and do one day. It's something that you have to practice at. But let me kind of go over the differences as far as why standing is more optimal for your antenna polarization and also for getting your transmitter and receivers off the ground a little bit more. And this is kind of why I started standing in the beginning. It was out of necessity. The video transmitters and stuff, also receiving antennas and receivers. Well, receiving antennas, I'm rocking the same one that I used to rock, the BAS Mad Mushroom, but, you know, the receivers weren't as good as they are today back when I started flying 3 or 4 years ago. So I wanted to get as much distance from the ground as I possibly could to also get better reception and get better transmission to the aircraft, because I was running 2.4 at the time, and, you know, it just seemed like a logical option to stand. Also, you're a little bit more mobile. You can, you know, fix problems a little easier. You can raise the antenna if you're a transmitter higher, if you have a failsafe or something. There are a lot of benefits to standing, but let's just kind of go over the generic standing position, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. So first of all, I use a neck strap. There are a lot of people that don't use a neck strap. I think it's a little bit more precise. I can, you know, worry less about holding the radio and worry more about what's happening on the sticks if I'm using a neck strap. So that's just my personal preference. Not everybody rocks a neck strap. I know Kevin Stinger Swarm doesn't ever use a neck strap, and he holds his radio and kind of does it like this. So, you know, I can do that when I fly line of sight. I don't typically use a neck strap because I'll fly like this, and I hold the radio in a certain way where I can actually get away with not using a neck strap, either with or without having it. So I can fly without a neck strap perfectly fine, but I prefer to fly with a neck strap just because it feels a little bit more secure. So clipping in the neck strap, making sure it's balanced. That's kind of a huge thing when you're standing. If your radio is sitting like this, it's not optimal that you're having to hold it in position. You're kind of negating having a neck strap anyways. So make sure the radio is balanced. And I know this is slightly kicked back, but I prefer it to be kicked back slightly. And this is just a typical, you know, whatever balance bar for the FR Sky Tyrannus, and I'm using the last hole. And then, you know, have it in an optimal position. Don't do it too high, whether or not you are comfortable at a higher position. You know, do whatever's comfortable for you, but putting it in a position that is comfortable, whether you're Angus Young or you're freaking the bass player from Korn and you're sagging down to your knees, it all depends on personal preference, but obviously the higher it is, the better. This just seems to be a comfortable position for me personally. So look at this, and now I'm gonna put the goggles on and show you my typical flying position. And this does change slightly because some days I feel like I need to tilt my head down a little bit more, but just in a generic standpoint, this is typically the standing position, and then you know what the sitting position was based on what I did a little while ago. So standing position, putting the goggles on, I have a little bit wider of a stance because, again, this is a learned skill, and if you stand really close together, you can potentially fall over. Based on people that move their heads a lot, this might not be something that you can learn, but, you know, whatever. I don't move a lot when I fly, so standing was something that I really wanted to work on. Now, this is the position that I fly in when I'm flying standing. My head is not perfectly level, but it is a lot more level and a lot higher off the ground, and I typically will aim my patch antenna up a little bit because I do realize that I have a slight down angle with my face and my head. So putting my antennas in proper polarization is a lot easier because you're standing straight up. Obviously you can do this, but you know, when you're standing, you usually put your head up because, you know, it puts a lot of strain on your neck if you're hanging your head down like this, and you could fall over. So, you know, I typically stand like this. Putting my antennas in proper polarization, I can point my head at wherever I want to do. It's a little bit easier standing up because I have mobility in my hips. I can turn my body. I can even turn like this slowly if I really want to get some optimal polarization for something. Maybe I'm flying in an area where, you know, there's a hill here and then there's a hill over there, and I want to do this one, and then I realize and understand spatial awareness, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to that hill now, and I turn my body a little bit at 15 to 20 degrees to the left, and now I'm optimally polarized for that particular hill. Now, if you look at my transmitting antenna, Obviously, this is not perfectly vertically polarized, and I do compensate for that if I'm diving something in close proximity to me, like a building, and I'll talk about that in a second. But it is a lot more optimally polarized than if I had an antenna going out straight, because that would be perfectly horizontally polarized. But I don't, like I said, like horizontally polarized things. I just personally have a problem with it. I've never had luck with it. I like vertical mounted stuff, so I try to get it as vertical as possible. How I did that is I'm running a 45-degree SMA off of the Crossfire, and this is the TBS tuned antenna, which is just a vertically polarized, or not vertically, but it's a linearly polarized antenna that is tuned at a higher gain than the actual stock T thing that comes on there. I just prefer this antenna over the Diamond. I don't know, it's smaller, it does the job. I have never had a problem with it. Now, obviously this is in a pretty good polarization as long as I'm flying around myself. There is a dead spot directly in front of me, and if I'm flying in an area where I'm going to fly directly in front of me, I will turn slightly sideways so that I'm getting a nice radiation donut, because there is a dead spot on the top and on the bottom. I think I explained that earlier, but if I didn't, there's a dead spot on the top of the antenna and a dead spot on the bottom of the antenna, and you have a donut style, literally picture a donut going out, and that is your radiation plot. So if you want good radiation plot and good signals going to your aircraft, don't point the tip of the antenna at the place you're going to go. Turn sideways and get that freaking radiation donut going towards your aircraft so that you can get an optimal signal. Now, with that being said, there are, some things that I have to adjust for, like if I'm standing and I want to fly something really close to me, I will kind of tilt the radio a little bit sideways so that I can get that donut up at the building. And I do have to realize that, hey, there is a dead spot directly up and out in front of me at like a 45-degree angle, but there's not really much I can do about that unless I hold the radio like this, which sometimes I do hold the radio like this when I'm flying really sketchy stuff and I really want to make sure that I'm not going to have a problem. I will hold the radio as high as possible, and I will also try to put the polarization of the antenna perfectly vertical so that the aircraft is in the most optimal position to receive signals so that I don't have a failsafe. Now, so those are kind of the differences between standing and sitting. Obviously, standing is not something that you can just pick up off the couch and do for most people. Some people can do that, and some people will say, I can't stand. How do you do it? And the real reason that I brought this up is because someone, one of my fans actually, sent a message and said, hey, I started standing the other day. I find it pretty cool and pretty intriguing as far as I'm getting better reception. Maybe you should do a video about it. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good idea, because it's something simple that a lot of people don't even really think about. But you can actually gain a lot of performance out of standing versus sitting, and that's really why I did it back in the day. So when I started flying, I started sitting. I had a little camping chair. I would sit down in it. I'd put my little grandma blanket over my legs, because here in the summer in Georgia, you got ants and stuff, and bees and horseflies and all kinds of crap trying to stab you in the shins, where standing is a little bit easier to swipe things off of you, or sitting, you might have to reach down between your legs and do something. So that's kind of why I started standing, not only to get away from the bugs, but also to put my antennas in a proper polarization and also get them higher off the ground. The higher off the ground the antenna is as far as the transmitting or receiving, the more reception it's going to be able to get. That's why you see all of these repeating antennas, and all of your antennas for your cell phone towers and all that stuff is as high as possible, because they want to cover as much ground as possible. The higher it is, the better it's going to be able to work as far as sending a signal or receiving a signal. So if you think about it like that, maybe 1.5 feet doesn't seem like a lot, but would you want to put your router on the floor? Or something? I mean, I know a lot of people put the routers on the floor, but you think it would be better if you put your router in the floor in the basement, or if you put it upstairs, on the top floor of your house? If you don't have a basement, I'm sorry, maybe on the bottom. But, putting it super low in the house versus putting it higher in the house, you're going to get better reception the higher it is, depending on how many objects it has to penetrate. It definitely won't penetrate the earth. So, you just think of the earth as a big sponge. The higher you are away from it, the less it's going to absorb. The closer you are to it, the more it's going to absorb. So that is kind of the deal with standing versus sitting. Again, I just thought it would be better to stand versus sit, because I could get my antennas higher off the ground, and then it turned into, actually I'm getting better polarization because I'm standing in a more optimal position. And how you might practice this, I know this is going to be the next question, is how do you practice standing? You can't just go out. I mean, some people can, but you go out and put goggles on and then just start standing. So there is kind of a technique to it. The wider the stance, usually the more, the more self-confident you feel about flying. If you're flying, you know, trying to balance on one leg, obviously that's going to be really difficult. So the wider the stance, the better it's going to be as far as learning, because you have more stability. You're putting your base a little bit wider. Also, depending on how you hold your radio, that can be kind of a thing. If you're holding it like this, you know, it might be a little disorienting because you have your arms up, you have like off-balance weight moving around up really high as far as your center of gravity is concerned. And then also the last thing is can you practice this without actually having goggles on? So I fly line of sight standing. I fly everything standing now. I know there aren't too many people that fly line of sight sitting. But the one thing that you can do is you can sit at a simulator and you can put goggles on, run an HDMI cable in, run it into your computer, and you can practice standing on a simulator. That way if you fall over, you're, you know, in the comfort of your own home instead of out in the woods somewhere. So that is kind of the technique of possibly learning standing over sitting. And again, some people, the Stevie Wonders and the Stephen Hawkings, they're going to have a really difficult time just because they want to move with the quad, and that's going to throw them off as far as what their body is doing. It is actually fairly difficult to disassociate your brain from your eyeballs seeing what they're seeing and then reacting as far as how your body is positioned. So, you know, that is a trained skill. It doesn't come overnight. It's taken me years to perfect it, and it's something that I really wanted to do based on performance of the aircraft and the actual transmitting and receiving signals. So, I hope this was a helpful video. I don't know if you noticed my sick Biggie shirt, but they are available at ethixltd.com. And we have some hats and swag and whatnot. So if you're curious and you really enjoy what we're doing here, is trying to just bring you guys little snippets and tidbits of information that are going to help with FPV and learning this hobby and taking it to the level that you wish to take it to, because it's not everybody needs to go freaking full-on racer pro and this stuff. Just, you know, do whatever you want to do and have fun doing it. So that's kind of the mentality that we're doing here. I'm trying to help people as much as possible by giving them as much little tidbit information that, you know, you might have to dig 100 years and you'll never find it in a forum, where, you know, right here you can, why sit versus stand? What's the difference? I'm trying to do little things at a time. So anyways, if you like this video, please comment and subscribe. And like, that really helps me out. And if you have any questions or you have something that you'd like to say about sitting versus standing, maybe you prefer one or the other, put it in the comment section below. I know I'd really like to, I read all the comments, so if you want to talk to me about, hey, sitting, I hate standing, sitting is the only way to go, then tell me why, because I'd really like to know. Thank you guys for watching, have a great day, and enjoy the rest of the week.
So the hair can't change direction. A tiny meal for the whole pack.